I'm here for episode 2 this morning. I haven't given up after the last one, which is a you class it a bit of a disaster, I guess. Today we're doing some beef short ribs on the barbecue. Now what I've found is I've got some just single ones. It reduces the cooking time a little bit, plus you get a bit more of the rub on the outside, so a little bit more added flavor to the meat. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm just sort of trying to trim the fat off so that you've got a nice meaty surface. If you leave that skin on there, sort of like this one here, you'll find that your rub or whatever that you do it in won't actually sink into the meat as well. So I'm taking that off. The other thing that I like to do is get the membrane off the back of the rib. Now, you don't have to do this, but I've found that it makes the meat sort of able to get off the bone a little bit easier. Again, it's not a must, but I definitely find that it works better when cooking ribs. So you can see it comes off fairly easily, and just leaves, like, you can see that it's not a shiny fatty surface anymore. So I'll trim these up and get them ready, and then we'll go on to the rub that I'm going to use on them today. I'm a really big fan of making my own rubs. I got this book given to me that's about rubs. It's got about 150 different recipes in terms of like marinades and cooking and rubs and sauces and all sorts of stuff. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take, this is probably the best coffee rub that I've ever tasted, but I'm going to make my own additions to it because last time I found it to be a little bit not sweet enough. So basically it's going to be exactly the same. I'm going to add a bit more brown sugar than it requests, and everything else is probably going to be about the same. So I'll start that, throw it there so that I don't forget what I'm doing. Same as last time. I'll put the recipe up for the rub, and I'll put the recipe up for the cooking instructions on the beef as well. So make sure that you use some nice fresh ground coffee. I wouldn't go using instant coffee because, I mean, you could, there's no reason why you couldn't. The good thing about this too is once you've made it, you can really just store it into an old jar that you've had, you know, anything in really, and then take it with you. So if you want to put a rub on something while you're out camping, or if you're, you know, going somewhere for a barbecue, you could always, you know, put it on there as well. Just adds a bit of, you know, a bit of uniqueness, and, you know, for the guys that know me that go barbecuing, or that I go over to their house for barbecues and stuff, obviously not in the last 6 months. I'm a big fan of, you know, different flavors and trying new things. And I think it's really important if you're gonna be known for your cooking, it's really important to offer something different. And that's sort of why I did this as well, because I like the thought of you know, being able to give people something outside of, you know, a standard cooking show. And there's plenty of camp cooking shows. There's some really good ones online at the moment on YouTube. Harry from Fire to Fork's probably got to be my favorite one. The guy's a dead set legend. Yeah, you can definitely help. So yeah, give them a watch. I think one thing that I've learned from the last episode that I tried to make is that it's extremely difficult, and a lot of work and preparation, and you've got to really be on point to make it work. So I give these guys so much credit who have got it down to a fine art and that have gone through all the stuff. You know, the reason that I actually put the last episode up was so that you guys could see that it's not an easy thing. I definitely could have been more prepared, and I underestimated what went into it. So I guess this time around, you know, moving forward, you're going to constantly learn from the experience. So I'm hoping that hoping they get better and better, and enough, you know, to have people watching. I don't want to change the world or anything. I just want to give something to people that they can watch when they need inspiration, and show it, keep everyone on my adventures. So I've got a helper now, so we'll get on with it. Awesome. So we've got our rub made up. We've got our ribs here ready to go. I want to probably, you know, you could soak these overnight. You could soak them for a while. You could do it for really as long as you want. The longer the better, obviously. Now, one thing I have learnt is that if you get yourself some of these black nitrile gloves, cleaning up your hands is so much easier. So what I'm going to do is, just to give the rub something to stick to, it sort of binds it a little bit better. Now, you don't have to do this step if you don't want. I've done it on the last couple of rubs that I've done, but I've just essentially just get some Dijon mustard. Just throw it on there like so. And this only gets used for meat, so there's no issue with and then I'll just give it a quick rub. So you don't need much, it's just a little bit to try and help that rub stick on a little bit. Again, you don't need much. You can use more or less. You're probably not going to impact the flavour too much with the amount that I'm putting on here. So then what I'm going to actually do is, I'm going to take this one off. I'm just going to grab the spoon, throw some of this rub over these, and then I'm going to rub it in. Now, usually having, you know, a rack, you don't have to worry about getting the sides, but because I've got single ones this time, we are going to have to... Hey, stop barking. As you can probably have told so far, I'm not out camping again. So this episode was done pretty close to the last one. So not quite allowed outside. But definitely looking forward to getting out. And everything to get the ends, easiest way is just to dip it in the mess that you've made everywhere. This isn't a very clean, easy process. So be aware you will get nice and dirty. Now the other thing that you can do here, I just use standard brown sugar because that's what I had. But you can also use dark brown sugar. And what that'll do is that'll give you a darker rub, which essentially in turn will make that rub look a bit darker when they're cooked. So that's it. I'm gonna leave them to sit for a couple of hours just because I've got the time. But as I said, half an hour, you can leave it. And these guys will soak up that flavor pretty quickly now that you've taken all of that fat off. We'll preheat the smoker. It's a beautiful day, 27 degrees outside, so it should be perfect weather out there. And these will probably take, I'm hoping, about 6 to 7 hours and come out really nice and tender. So I'll see you when we're ready to cook. Okay, so I'm going to set this at about 150 because this seems to run at about 10 degrees cooler than the actual, what the thermometer says. I've got my 2 probes in. They're just as a guide. I want it to get around that 205 degrees Fahrenheit. And there we have it. Okay, what I'm going to do, as I said, I've got a fair bit of this rub left over. I've got a couple of empty jars that you may have seen me end up emptying earlier on. All I'm going to do, not too much because these are obviously not small jars. I've had, you know, the bigger ones are probably a bit easier to store. But I mean, with something like this, the last lot I kept for a good few months. And didn't have an issue in terms of it going off or anything. The other thing which I probably didn't do is give it a nice stir so that you don't end up, you know, with all the coffee in one jar. It looks like these are okay though, so there you have it. We'll just label them up as coffee rub and we'll get to use them next time. Okay, so they're cooking really well. I'm just going to wrap them up and put them in for the last bit so they get a nice even sort of, you know, they don't lose that moisture too much. So let's see how they are. Okay, so we've got them out, as you can see, nice and juicy. Definitely a bit of spice on there. So if you don't like spicy food, Maybe just on that dry rub lay off on the cayenne pepper a bit. As you can see in there, it's still nice and moist. We'll grab the knife, we'll cut it open and we'll see what she's like. Meat falls apart. As I said, definitely a bit of spice there. So if you don't like hot food, maybe lay off the cayenne pepper in that recipe. But other than that, it is really good.